feeling a bit like Alice? Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
Curiosity often leads to trouble.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I'm awake. Are you? Let's go now to our new episode of The Unfiltered Rise with me, Heidi Love.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Unfiltered Rise. And today I have with me Matt from the Great Deception podcast, which I'm very honored to have you as a guest. Thank you for coming on. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, great. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
excited to talk
excited.
because, just talking to you as we introduced each other, it was like, oh man, this is
Yeah,
going
I'm
to
a
go
studier.
deep.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. I always tell everyone, I'm like, people see me or they see my profile stuff and they're like, I think I've been told that was more than I expected. I didn't think you would know that much. I'm like, oh no, I'm a nerd, which I rally with. We have to learn,
See, but
right?
that's what most podcasters are.
Yeah.
We're all
yeah.
nerds at heart because, nobody spends this much time looking at this weird and,
Yeah.
it's kind of counterculture, right? Because it's
Right.
not part of the narrative. And if you think of the narrative as like a patchwork, it starts tearing at the seams of it. And the more of it you start tearing, that fabric, that blanket starts falling apart. And this is one of those things that really starts tearing at the seams of this whole narrative that they've given to us as the history of America. And
Oh yeah, I don't believe any of it anymore. I saw not only your stuff, but Mind Unveiled. Have you seen
Yep.
Mind Unveiled
I
stuff?
love their
Once
work.
I watched that, I was like, oh my gosh, ruined Christmas. By the way, no, I still do it, but I was like, holy crap, and sharing with everyone. But then they start, like you said before, we started. It was like, yeah, you try to share it and tell people stuff, and they're like, you're so crazy. You go take
Yeah.
your meds,
Oh, but see, I like that because if everybody
Yeah.
was into it, I don't think it would be that interesting. It's like,
Yeah.
if this becomes mainstream, I'm going to have to find something else that's a little obscure to get into because, the mainstream stuff bores me.
Yeah, I agree. And well, I just think you're always going to have the people that believe. And like we talked a little tiny bit about 2020, because you were saying when you got into the game, and there's been actual, operations where they have done things to people for mind control, where they've taught them something and they've only done it in fear for 30 days. And then they tried to reverse it, and like the sky is purple, we'll just say that, and then they come back later, the very person that told you the lie, and say no, the sky is blue, don't worry, it's blue. And they will never change, no matter if you show them, no matter if you prove it, no matter if you are the person that said it, it will never change because it was told to them in fear. And
Yep.
So this is
And
where we're at.
and one of the old, like, I think he's like a late 60s, 70s artist, Harry Chapin, was like a kind of a folk singer. And one of his songs are called Flowers Are Red. And it's just that point. It's this kid who goes to kindergarten and he starts drawing flowers of all different colors. And the teacher's like, no, flowers are only red. And so he gets yelled at. So next day they start drawing flowers again. He starts drawing all these colors. She's like, no, they're red. So after time that goes on, he transfers schools. He goes to the new school and he goes and he starts, and she goes, okay, draw the flowers. And he draws them all red. And she's like, well, what about all the different colors? He goes, no, flowers are just red,
Yeah.
And so they basically beat it into him and it's exactly what you're saying,
So
that,
true.
after time and with kids, they're so malleable.
Yes.
And what we're talking about tonight is all about kids. And
Yes.
and even today, you look at what's going on in modern times, modern politics. Where's the emphasis right now? It's on the kids, whether it's medical injections, whether it's medical procedures, whether it's pharmaceuticals they want to get them on. There is an attack on children in today's in our country, and it's bad.
Absolutely. Well, and even other countries don't do what we do. Like if you go to other countries, they don't even have the same approved foods we do.
Nope.
They don't give their kids certain things. Their food, by the way, I've traveled all over, it's better. Their Coke is better. I know you shouldn't drink Coke, but it's better there. Like I mean, there's certain things that you're going to do no matter what, but like at least if we could minimize the damage, and they're doing it on purpose.
Yep.
And people joke about it in other countries. They're like, America poisons their own kids. Like,
Poisons and
wow.
traumatizes.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a daughter that's very much one that does not fit in a box. And she's my straggler. She's my last of 6. And she's 10 and my son is 16. That's the next one up. And then I've got even kids way older. I've got almost a 28-year-old that's got a baby, everything. So I've got all these kids that have been pretty okay in the school system, but this one, she has real bad ADHD, but she doesn't have the kind that hurts anyone. She's not violent. She's not mean. She's disruptive in a way because she wants to talk to everyone. She wants to, do her own way, like whatever, draw the flowers her own color. And so sure enough, we got to the point where we were just like, you know what, I think there was one day where she had an argument with the teacher over shoelaces and I was just done. I was like, look, if you can't even help her with shoelaces, like, I don't trust you, first of all. Second of all, you have her so frustrated. She's like losing it because she missed recess because you didn't help her with her shoelaces. And she said, well, I never said she had to tie him before. I just said, I'm not going to tie him for you. I'm like, so you made it impossible. And so I went to the school that day and I literally pulled her out of school and I was just done. I was like, all right, well, I guess we're just going to put you in a Montessori school and that's what we're going to do. And that's what we did. And she's never been
It's
back
unfortunate.
public.
Public schools are bad right now, and there's no incentive for the teachers to push harder. Everything's standardized tests, and that's how they get all their funding. So that's what they push towards. And that standardized testing is from Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yep.
And we know what they love to do to children. So,
yeah.
it's just, it's a cycle,
It really, and they certainly don't care about my kids or impoverished kids or anybody else's kids. Like if people like think that he cares about you've really lost it. Like at some point you have to understand, people always say like my mom was a hard one because she grew up in a time where the government was pushed like really a lot of patriotic and this and that, and they wouldn't do that. They love us. And I'm like, they don't love you. You're a cockroach. Do you love the cockroach? Do you think about their families before you kill them in your house? Because you don't, that you're no different to them. And she just couldn't, for a long time, she couldn't, she's there now, but she just could not get past that. Like why would they do that? And I'm like, Mom, they hate you. Like, what do you mean?
They've trained you to love them, to worship them in a sense, to obey
and trust.
Yes.
And they bring God into it a little bit. And my son was one that brought that to me. He said, Mom, you teach me all about God. You teach me all about this stuff. And he came home one day. He said, I got in trouble. And I was like, oh Lord, what'd you do? He's a good kid. And I said, why? What happened? And he said, I'm not doing the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. There's no way. And I'm like, well, you have to stand up at least, because we have people in our family that were in the military and have died and like served. And he said, no, I don't have a problem with any of that. I don't want to say anything that I'm pledging to anything other than God. Like it's like a weird symbolized thing. You taught me all about this. And I had to sit there and go, oh my gosh. Okay. I'll talk to the teacher.
And what's even scarier is you have to question who is the God that they are referencing.
Yep.
Because is it the one that everyone else is, or is it the God that this nation is built on, which isn't the one everyone thinks it is?
No, it's definitely, I would say, more so gods than God. And
yes,
there are multiple. And if you do any of your research, if you go into occultism, if you go into mythology, if you go into any kind of other religion other than a Christ centered, now take Christ out of it, any other religion, you're going to have a big surprise, because at the end of it all, a lot of times it leads back to these same things we're talking about. And I think that there were things here that we didn't fully understand. I think there was many tribes of giants, just like Genesis 6 says. I just talked to Ryan Peterson about this last week, and we had a good talk about this, but I was already an easy sell because I already knew. And I know that if you go back to Native Americans, they knew, they talked about it openly. The reason why you say how is because they're checking how many fingers are on your palm, because they had 6. And that was really widely known. And if you go through each one of their tribes, they have different names, but they all have names for giants, every one of them. And so, this was a cleansing. I believe when I found all of your stuff and the orphan train thing, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to this guy. Because I was like, this was the whitening of America. Where do you know that is so white? We aren't normally white. Like, I mean,
No.
Africa, like Adam and Eve, all the people, it's like browns and mixes of browns and black. Like, it's really not, if you were white, you were just light skinned brown. It wasn't white, and I believe they were trying, just like Hitler. And I know people are going to just go on me for that, but like, this is an agenda that has lived far before this is an agenda to be like a creator that they saw, which the Nephilim were white. They just were. And so.
Well, and the colonial powers, right? That's who were I mean, that's who I look at as kind of the antichrist of this realm right now, because you look at the devastation and destruction they've done all over the world, and everywhere they went, it was conversion or death.
Conversion
there
or
was
death. Yep.
Yeah, and the American genocide is one of the most disturbing ones, because you look at it and the way it's portrayed, and coming off of Thanksgiving recently, you look at the whole story of the Puritans and the Indians, and that didn't end well.
It didn't happen. Yeah. Well, and it didn't happen the way they said. They didn't sit down and break bread and have corn. That wasn't.
I mean, it's and why pick that story, right? And so we'll go back to the 1800s, and you're looking at it, and this is absolutely what you're talking about. It's the whitening of America. It's the Europeanization of it. It's taking the color out of it.
Absolutely. And who ran that? Who ran that show? The Freemasons did. And they've always been 100%, even if and this is why I knew with what you were saying was true, because Mormonism is just a branch of Freemasonry. Let's be honest, like it is. And so when I went down that rabbit hole and listened to all your stuff, I was like, no, this makes a lot of sense, because they would say in Mormonism that they wanted everyone to become more white and delightsome. It's in their Book of Mormon. And so, and they were very against like bringing African Americans into the church. They withheld the priesthood till 1978. They were really racist. And I think there was a reason. And it was more than just like, because it wasn't just because of the times. It had to do with their ancestry and keeping things pure. I think they knew certain things. I do. I truly do. Some of these clubs have, big clubs, and we're not in them, right? Like I was in that one, but I'm a woman. So anyway.
But you watch it, and it's just like you watch over time, and it was just a whitening of America. And then what's even crazier is, to cap it all off, they have the Great White Exposition in Chicago in 1893. And this is like kind of the ribbon cutting ceremony, so to speak, of going from the old world to this new world they want to have. And it all, in the timeline of things, it all works to this. And it's exactly what you said. They're whitening and expanding their presence in this, what they claim is a new world, but they've, there's been people here since time in memoriam.
A confiscated world. It's a confiscated
Yeah, I mean,
world.
it's
Yeah.
and here's the other thing though. I think it's changed hands multiple times, right? I
Mhm.
think there were people here before what we see as the Native Americans, right? And I think,
Oh, no, there were. Yeah, there
yeah,
were
and
cities.
it's like
They built all this.
we just look back one generation, and that's my
Mhm.
thing with looking at this history. And I have such a hard time believing it because it's such a short time frame when you look at it. And then you get into timeline manipulation, which we won't even talk about tonight.
No, yeah.
But that's a whole nother thing that jumbles this whole thing up. So you can't really tell what's real, what happened when, because it just doesn't add up.
No. And the fact is that like with the Mormons, the whole reason why I got into old world stuff too is there's no way they built that Salt Lake Temple. There's absolutely no way. That was here. I'm 100% certain that was here. It was part of the mud flood. If you look at old pictures of it, it goes 4 more stories underground and they proved it. John Levi did a big expose on it when they were redoing it and restructuring it for earthquake safety.
Yep.
And he went down there and did this big expose. And I'm like, there's no way that was already there. That was definitely and not just that building, many buildings. I mean, you can go to other countries, and I was telling you, like, I've been all over. And my daughter was a flight attendant. I'm not extremely wealthy. I just got really lucky for a little while. And so we went to Paris, we went to Rome, we went all these places, we went to Venice. When you go and you step inside some of those places, man, I mean, there were times when I would go back after the evening was over and I was just done. I was wiped. Like, it's a weird feeling. It's a weird place to be.
Well, it's energetic. Those
Mhm.
places are built on energetic grounds. They are constructed in a symmetrical manner, to harness, to generate, to, resonate, whatever the way they are specifically designed. It's an energy, it's like a pyramid is the way I look at it. That's what a lot of these cathedrals and old buildings are. I mean, you look at it, they're just giant resonators.
Absolutely. And I think that they knew that and they harnessed it. I think that they definitely, with all of the coils and different things that they used to put on top of buildings. And I definitely think they had way more air travel, the whole vanilla sky thing. I'm like, nope, this is there is something up with this stuff. I mean,
well, and you look down to the materials, right? Even the materials they built with, the red bricks, the granite, which has a lot of quartz in it, which is very conductive. They're conductive materials, and it's been proven that they can harness electricity. And then you look at them, like you said, the spires that go up to the sky. Well, from those spires, you also usually had a copper wire or copper rod that went into the ground. And so anyone that knows anything about electroculture, which is, using the earth's energy to grow vegetation, you take a little bit of copper, you wrap it and bury a little in the soil, have a little bit coming out above the ground. It will yield you a better growth in your plants because it is harnessing. There's a natural energy. And I was listening today to the Wicked Planet podcast. Ron from New England just had a new one out, and they're talking about Hawaii. And the guy that he has on was talking about the voltage between the ground and the sky, and the amount of voltage I can't remember offhand, but it's significant. All you have to do is find a way to harness it. And I think that's what a lot of these churches are, and a lot of these old buildings are. They are put on strategic points to act together and work together. And then you add in the bells, right? Which is a frequency that heals the body. Why did they take away all bells from churches? No, no one has a real bell anymore. Not anyone
yeah. And they added the pews later. You used to go there and lay down.
Yes.
And so, yeah, people don't understand. They've lost. It's like my uncle always says, you're one generation away from disappearing. He always tells me this, right? Because we talk a lot. He used to be a Green Beret, and he's retired, and he's heavily, like, he was in the special force. He knows a lot of stuff. Okay. And we always talk, and he's like, you think that thing in Hawaii was an accident? Like he flat told me, no effing way. Like,
there's no way. Yeah, no shot.
Yeah, he's like, there are things in this world that, I mean, he's not going to break it down, but he'll give me a head nod, you know.
Yep.
And he tells me all the time, he's like, no, we've had this kind of stuff forever. This isn't a new thing, that we've
No.
had this for years. Yeah. And people don't think it's real. And meanwhile, we're on Bluetooth in my ear. Why does it work? I don't know. And
Yeah.
we're talking and you're clear across the country from me. And how does that work? I don't know. And nobody cares to really care either. As long as they're
No.
playing their video games and ordering pizza, it's fine. And
We are
I
magicians,
order
by the
pizza.
way,
Yeah.
because this is all magic. That how we do this. It's all crystal. It's all using crystals. And people are like, oh, no, no, no. I don't do that. Yes, you do. Anyone that talks on a phone where you look at someone
Yes.
else, you are using crystals.
That is a
And
liquid crystal display. And this knowledge came from John D. It's a Nokian magic.
yes,
100%.
absolutely.
Yes.
And it
100%.
again, I mean, you can go either way with it. You can go down any rabbit hole you want with this stuff. It all comes back and it's all connected. And anybody that tells you differently, like, how could it be? Well, it's connected, but it's compartmentalized. Right. And that's what they did. Like, if circling back to the whole concept of the orphan trains, like, that's what they did with this. They compartmentalized it so that not everyone knew the whole project that was going on, except for the, elite circle of it running it. But there were a lot of people involved who thought, and it goes back to, some of the people that were in 2020 and such that thought they were doing the right thing and trying to help other people. That's what I feel like these people
Some
in these
do.
orphan
Some
trains.
do.
Well,
I think
yeah,
some know. Some are of true heart, and I feel like some were like actually good people. But I think some of them are the Bill Gates of their day, and they knew. They
oh,
knew
absolutely. No,
100%.
I think
Yep.
honestly, I think the majority knew
Yeah.
that but they were afraid to say anything. But what I'm saying, the rest of them, I think it was just ignorance is bliss. We talked about before, the indoctrination has been very well programmed into us to trust authority, to obey.
Absolutely.
And I think that a lot of programming clicked on people, and that's what they locked into.
Well, like Mark Hoffman's wife. I don't know do you know who that is?
No.
He did these bombs against the church, the Mormon church. Okay. But his wife was in the house. He's making bombs in his office. And he's this rare document stealer. And she never once stepped in the office. And they said to her, well, didn't you want to go in there? Like, she said, oh, he told me not to. And so she knew something was up, like you're saying, but she just was happy to not. She said it was one less room to clean. That was her quote.
Hey, I don't blame her. If I'm with somebody and they're like, hey, you might want to stay out of this room, I'm like, all right, unless you give me a reason to question why I need to go in that room, I'm staying out of there.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of people did. Yeah. They just didn't want to get in the middle of it,
and that's what they did because what they started doing with all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, there's all these kids, right. So what do they start doing? They start building these orphanages. Well, who runs the orphanages? A lot of the times it's the what's their name?
The Oddfellows were a lot of them. I
was going to say the funny hat guys, the Oddfellows.
Yeah.
And who works in conjunction with them is usually the Freemasons. So these two groups, Oddfellows usually ended up running the asylums, orphanages, whatever you want to call them, for these kids. And so they're all over the East Coast. Now, mind you, that's where the heavy presence of the population is. And at this time, what else is going on? They're trying to get this push west, right? But there's natives in the way. There's not easy routes of travel that we're told of at that time. So there's a lot of factors why you just can't, roll it out that way. So what they're doing is they're gradually gaining ground and pushing and holding territory.
Well, and who's unassuming? A child is a very unassuming thing. Like, even a Native American sees a kid, even if you're at war with the other tribe, whatever, you're at war with the white man, you're probably not going to kill a kid. Probably not.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna look at that as a non-threat to you. And so, you know, it's an insidious thing though, because in 20 years from there, they've taken over your land because they've populated and made a whole colony, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of
And
polygamy.
the kicker of it was every treaty that we made with the natives we broke. And
Absolutely.
I don't, okay, let me stop. I hate saying we. The United States government. That's not
Yeah.
me. It's not you.
That's not me.
It's none of us. The United States government broke every treaty that they made with the natives. So the natives would agree to a deal, and then next thing you know, it would get broken, and they just keep getting pushed. And eventually it got to the point where they were beaten down to and pushed to reservations. And this is that same time frame of the 1800s.
Yes.
So
and then I think they knew too, they started finding out the little ways to get to them. Like there's no way they would just secede to that. I think they found ways like, oh, you want tobacco, you want alcohol, you want easy things, you want comforts. I mean, just think of the things that they do to us to get us to comply. You want it to be easy.
And another thing they did, they slaughtered millions of buffalo intentionally so that they would not have a source of food, clothing, you know, everything, because that was a very important piece of the native culture, especially those in the plains tribes. And they just went out and slaughtered them. And they would send people on trains and just shoot as many buffalo as you can as the train rolls through town, and they just leave them out there to rot, which is, you know, on top of everything, so disrespectful and so disgusting. But it's what the United States government loved to do. Is just that it's a terror campaign, right? If you think about it, because what are we talking about? We're not just talking about natives that are you know, on the attack. We're talking about settlements that have been there for how long? You know, we don't know how long, and things like that. Because and like you mentioned before, the biggest thing they wanted to do, I think, was to capture that oral history.
Yes.
And suppress that oral history, because I think there's a lot more to this land than the white story that we've been told nowadays, the colonial tale of the United States.
Yeah, it's definitely, and people have such a funny, I mean, they'll gladly jump in and believe that we formed this United States of America for religious freedom. But if you turn it around and say, but do you know what religion they were fighting for? This is about Freemasonry. This is about other gods, plural. This is not about the God. This is not as much about Christianity as you might want to believe. Do they mask it under that? For sure. It's way easier. Not that every person that came here was about that, but the main people in charge, they were Freemasons, period. And I mean, it's not even disputed. They know, everyone knows that.
So. No, it's open, it's public, but people don't want to put two and two together. They don't want to assume that, like, you look at the apotheosis of Washington on the ceiling of the rotunda of the Capitol, it's all Greek gods. It's Washington with a bunch of Greek gods, and it tells you right there, but people don't want to see it. So what do they have to do? They have the way they get rid of this is by brainwashing, right? And what better way to start? Who would you start with if you're going to brainwash people?
Yeah, I would definitely start with the people that are resisting.
Yeah,
that's
and
for sure.
Right? Yep. And go after the children. So what do they, you know,
lock up all the ones. Yeah, lock up the ones that won't comply.
Oh, and that's why you see, what do you see in this same time?
Tons of asylums.
Right?
These are not people. If you have not looked at pictures of these asylums, they are villages. This is not castles. A building. Yeah, this is like a whole gated off multiple building areas. Huge. I mean, the one in New York is gigantic. I can't remember.
Yeah, they're all stone. They're all huge complexes usually. And you think, like, why would they go through all this effort for crazy people or for kids?
And they're fancy. They're like super fancy too.
Oh, they're beyond intricate. You know,
Yeah.
the construction on them it's stuff we can't do today.
No.
Or
And they withstand. They still
yeah,
stand. It's so
yes,
unless they tear them down, they stand until they don't fall.
yeah.
It's like wild. And so yeah, they repurposed them, I'm sure some of them, but
So all of a sudden in like the 1850s, there's all these orphans, you know, and New York City, it's something like over 50% of the population is orphans at the time in the early 1850s. So coincidentally, there's a guy named Charles Loring Brace who happens to be a Freemason that sees all these full orphanages and says, man, there's got to be something we can do with these kids. And actually, I'll pull it up right here because
great.
his quotes are quite interesting when you look at him. Where is he? Here he is. So he founded the Children's Aid Society, and as we know with names, whenever we think the opposite, right? So when you hear aid, it's not to help. It's usually some other way. So he came up with the idea, and what he decided was that these kids should go have a family life with the pioneers going out west, with the farmers that needed hands to work the farms. So he said the best of all asylums for the outcast child is the farmer's home. The great duty is to get these children of unhappy fortune utterly out of the surroundings and send them away to kind Christian homes in the country. Right.
And the funny thing is this has been put into your movies and you don't even recognize it, because even into the point when I was a young girl, like think of The Princess Bride. What did they call the boy? He was the farm boy. Yeah. And this has been told all the time to you. Who's the farm boy? Like, when the heck did that become a thing? It just was a thing. And this was worse than slavery because they were put up on a stage. They were not bought. They were given for free. And that you just went there and looked at the stage. And that's why it's called put up for adoption, because they put them up. And you would go look at their teeth and their bodies, and the big ones would go first. And it's so sad.
What's even crazier is there's a documentary on Amazon, if anybody's interested. It's like an hour long. It's called West by Orphan Train. And they go through and talk about a couple specific instances of kids that went through it. But they were talking about, you know, people would send in requests to say, you know, I need a kid with a boy with brown hair and brown eyes. And they would find a kid with brown hair and brown eyes that would meet it. They'd send it to the family. Now, if it met its expectations, the family would end up keeping the child. If not, they would send it back. Think about the trauma to that kid. He's just being pushed around. He has no say in where he's going. If there was any issues with the family, you know, abuse, anything like, you don't know where you're going. It's not like when they sent these kids to families, there was like child services following up and seeing what kind of conditions they were in. So a lot of these kids were treated like farmhands, you know.
They said well, a couple on PBS, there's some really old docs on PBS that they actually interviewed some of these kids. And they said, yeah, I went to 3 or 4 homes before I finally was old enough to emancipate and get married. And a lot of these stories were the same. And one girl did have a good home. She had a really good family. And she said, I went to go try to find out any information on my real parents, because unlike most people back then, you didn't ask about adoption. You didn't talk about adoption. If you were lucky enough to be adopted, you were their kid, and that was all. And that was what you got. You didn't hear about, you know, your mother this or your father that or whatever. And so she went back because her dad he was more open and said, oh, we blessed you here. We got you from this orphanage in New York, blah, blah, blah. So she went to go try to get records. And they said, as soon as you were blessed in the church, in the Catholic Church, with your new parents, baptized with your new parents' names, that is your name. That is the only record we have of you. And they've erased all these children.
Yes, they gave them all numbers. Right. And it's it's one of those things where I wonder on multiple fronts that these kids probably wouldn't have been in the system because they seem like they were kind of fringe to begin with, and a lot of them were foreigners. So they wouldn't have been in our system anyway. But this is a way now to start tracking, and it's equivalent of slave trade in a sense.
Yep.
I hate to make the
It's the
comparison, but
truth.
they're
Yeah.
numbering these kids and they're moving them around on trains, and they go to whomever. There's no
And the
real
weird, yeah, and the weird part too is no black writers, no brown writers, not allowed.
No.
That's why we get back to whitening. Why is America so white? It's one of the few countries that is. It doesn't make any sense when you rewind it, into back in the world. It wasn't this way. And so, of course, there was an agenda, as always.
Yeah. And so how does this tie in on multiple levels? Well, then you take these orphans and they would go on these trains and through, well, in another big thing in the late 1800s were these world fairs, which are just spectacles where it was basically showing you the world of tomorrow and what was
the
to
world
come.
of yesterday.
Yeah. Right.
Tartaria.
And so in Chicago, they would bring these kids in and they would indoctrinate them. They would take them through, and they would have little booklets that they would go through, and they would have to write things down. And it was an indoctrination camp. They would go through, and then they would put them on the train, move them along. So they were brainwashing these kids to learn the new narrative and then moving them along.
And then the sad thing is it goes right back to the Nazi regime type thing. Is the brown shirts became the good orphans that were the ones that did it well to teach the next orphans, this is how you're going to be, because the Oddfellows oftentimes became from orphans. And so they were the good ones that were the leaders. It was like, you think about the games we play, like follow the leader. I mean, this stuff didn't come out of nowhere, and Hitler surely did not invent it. Like, that's not the thing. Yeah.
No, I mean, he didn't invent anything. He just took other people's ideas and put them together, and that's why it's so scary what we see in this stuff. And like you're saying, it's just one of those things that, how do they do this? How do they get away with this? And not only was it American kids, I mean, a majority of the kids from the United States came from New York. So you ask yourself, why all these orphans? There was a lot of them being shipped in from Ireland, a lot of Irish, a lot of Germans coming in from Europe and coming to Ellis Island. And so they're coming through New York. And the other thing that you have to ask is, okay, there's illness at the time, right? There's parents leaving. One of the craziest stories I heard is that if, say a single mother got sick and was hospitalized, they would take the kid and throw him on the orphan train. And he'd be like, no, my
grandpa,
mom's my mom's in the hospital. She'll be right out. I'm just going to wait. Nope. Boom. Sent him. And then that was it. Like you said before, they erase the memories of the past, disconnect you from your name, whatever your past life. And now you're going to do this.
And how do you even get back? If you are lucky, like my great grandpa was an orphan, and it was because his mother got sick, and all of a sudden they took him to an orphanage. I mean, she wasn't even dead yet. They went and got him when she was dying so he could see her one last time. And he said, wait a minute, my dad is still alive. And I don't even know what happened with the dad, but finally somebody came, one of his family members got him out. Luckily he had an uncle or someone that loved him enough to go get him, or else he would have had the same, it was
well,
bad.
and that's what you hear. They say, in the West by Orphan Train documentary, they say up to 2 million people are relatives of the orphan train. I think that number is much higher. I think maybe 2 million alive are direct descendants, but I think so many more people, when you start going back and looking at your family history, when you get so many families, when they get to that mid 1800s, it just becomes a big blur.
Drops off unless you have family that came from other places and
Yes.
you stayed together, like the Mormon pioneers. I'm a Mormon pioneer heritage. They stayed together. So like mine goes way back to France and stuff, like, and Ireland, Scotland stuff. But other people's, like the branches in our family history, because they're really big on family history, they were just gone after 18 something. And we're like, wait, what happened to that uncle? Or
Yep.
what was going on with this person? And not only these people, and I want to stress to people, these children during a very short amount of time, what they will admitted, and probably they weren't even taking that good of care to count. 250,000. That isn't like, we're not talking about a few thousand kids here. That is a lot of kids when you have a tiny population. That wasn't very big back then.
No,
I mean,
and that's the thing. And when these kids were traveling, right, when they had them on the trains, it was usually 2 to 3 adults supervising 30 to 40 kids on a train. Now, they started out in like cattle cars, and gradually over time they got to sleeping cars by, the 1920s and such. But up until then, they were moving them around like cattle and unsupervised. So imagine having teenagers mixed in with toddlers and, 1 or 2 sets of eyes on it. It's not going to go well. There's going to be stuff that happens that cannot be prevented. And it's another layer of trauma for these kids, let alone just being separated from your parents and thrown on a train. And, and
I
then
can't even imagine.
Then they pull into these cities, right? And they're told to get off, and they basically have to perform for these people. The girls have to show, some skills. The boys are mainly forced to show that they can be strong, so that they're good farm workers and things like that. And they're like a spectacle. And if they're not taken, they get back on the train and go to the next stop. Now, where did they go when they got off the train? It was usually a local Mason lodge.
Yep.
And that's where the people of the town would come. And it's not like, so let me see here.
And we're not saying that all Freemasons are terrible or anything, but I'm just saying, like, isn't that interesting?
Well, yeah, no, and so, okay, so let me just share this here. Let's share this. Okay. So what we have here is a poster, right? And they would put these posters in town ahead of the trains coming. So this one's from 1910. It said wanted homes for children. And it's basically come February 25th to the Opera House at 1:30, and there will be orphans there. And if you can afford one, great. I mean, it's one of these things where they put these, it's a spectacle. I mean, you just look at the chaos, and then here's one of the, this is one of the cards that the kids would get, right? So this is one of their identification cards. And it's just, so disheartening. You look at this and it's like, see, this is a newspaper article, 1887, where the Children's Orphan Aid Society of New York City, in the first week of January, will send a company of homeless orphan children. So anybody that is looking for one, just show up Friday night or Friday at 2 p.m. It's just,
it's wild.
It seems, it doesn't seem like these people are human. It's almost like,
it's so like, oh, here's a puppy in a box.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Well, if you want to get weird, I mean, this is so you have all this going on, right? And then you get to the Civil War, where the number of orphans is just going to explode. So there's even more, fuel for your fire. Well, then you start getting to the late 1870s, 1880s. And over in France, they're starting to develop these incubators for babies. And they're these machines that supposedly are built for premature babies to keep premature babies alive. Now, let's just use logic here. What have we been talking about for the past hour?
We have too many
Orphans.
kids. Yeah, we have too many kids.
Too many orphans. But now, all of a sudden, we're worried about saving babies.
Save all the babies
Or
so we can have more orphans.
or possibly creating babies, right? That's the other going real conspiratorial about it. But what we're looking at is these incubators. So what are these incubators? And again, they're these machines, these devices that are created to keep babies alive. Now, how does this tie in? Well, at the World's Fairs, again, a stage, so to speak, they would have separate setups of what they called infantoriums, which was a slew of incubators. And it was like an exhibit. You would get a ticket and you would go in and look at babies in incubators. And you could buy the babies. If you like the way they look, you could buy one right there at the fair and take it home with you right then and there. And so that progressed and that escalated, right? So at Chicago World Fair, it was the first one. By the time, and that's 1893, 1901 in Buffalo, it gets even bigger. And then you get to 1904 in St. Louis, which is one of the bigger World Fairs along with Chicago in America. And it's huge. They have a huge exhibit there. It's this Dr. Martin Cooney is this gentleman's name. And he's this guy who all of a sudden becomes this baby incubator guru.
And he's not even a doctor. Yeah. He wasn't even a doctor, really. They just called him that.
Yeah, he was more of like an ophthalmologist or no, I can't even.
He had never had any experience with any of this, which is weird that they would make him the boss.
And even if he is a doctor, how the hell is he developing a machine? Right? Yeah. Is he an engineer also? Did he develop? No, he stole the technology from the French, is what happened. And they just, much like they did with a lot, they slapped their own sticker on it and we invented this.
Well, did you hear about all the ones that ended up like he did some experiment with some of them? I don't know if it was him or in France, but where they left him alone and didn't mess with them too much. And they grew like gigantically, like big, huge, giant babies.
Oh, there's all sorts of tales about what kind of weird stuff came out of these.
Yeah. Like strange.
I mean, you hear now, let me show you. I got to show you this picture because it blows my mind every time I look at it. Because there's something about it that doesn't sit right. Okay?
Yeah. Look at the babies.
I mean, what are those?
Yeah.
Are those real babies? Are they alive? Are they dead? I mean,
yeah, that one looks not okay.
They don't look
with
real.
The arm out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like rigor mortis almost with the arm. And
yeah, the arm thing is weird. The other one looks extremely premature. I've worked in the NICU and they do get weird heads like this, but that one doesn't look right. The hand splayed out. Yeah.
And holding them like that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Just the whole
weird
concept of it is weird. And so I wonder, I look at these incubators and you start seeing it. And, it wasn't like a thing that was a minor thing. I mean, people would get season passes at Coney Island to go look at the incubator babies, like real creepy shit.
Yeah, that's so. And have you heard of this little conspiracy? Of course, it's folk tale, but of Kaurava. Does that sound familiar to you? Kaurava from India. They say that this was the person that invented test tube babies 7,600 years ago. The first one's name was Drona Karya. Like Draconia. Sounds like that. You know what I'm saying? Drona and then CH like chimera, like Charya.
Like hybrid.
Yep. And I immediately saw the name and went, wait a minute, because I was looking up information on the Cybele, Astarte, the El Shaddai, Diana with all the breasts,
Yep.
all these goddesses, because they said that in India, they said this entity, whatever it was, could have hundreds of babies a day. What if, and you know how all the exploration of other countries became really popular, like all the white people would go visit these other countries all the time to find out their knowledge. What if that was something that they found out? I mean, we're just going conspiratorial here.
Oh,
but
absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
well, okay, if we're gonna go conspiratorial then, and
I love
going
it.
along that lines, let's go right to the book itself.
Yep.
There's a
Yep.
book out there called Babylon Surreal Babies.
I've seen this. It's so
And
creepy.
what this is a collection of postcards from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it depicts children in the most disturbing
Weird.
scenes. Okay, this one has them in a boiling cauldron.
Yes.
And let's see. Okay, this one has them in eggs. Okay,
Hatching out of eggs. Yeah. So
hatching.
weird.
Now, saying what you just said, I mean,
Yep.
I don't know any babies that hatch.
No.
These ones are tied to a sheep. Like,
It goes right along with that weird movie that was one of the first movies too, where they were like attached to cows, and it was like really disturbing. Not the fairy one. The fairy one was also disturbing, but there was like a weird cow one that they got rid of.
yeah.
And
So, okay. So this one is so bizarre.
Yeah,
Has
they're just
babies
everywhere.
growing out of cabbage.
Yes.
Okay. Like Cabbage Patch Kids. And it
So
says,
weird.
okay. And this is from the book. I can't get over this quote. It says, pedophiles apart, who were the public for these cards? Like,
Right.
who is interested in this stuff
Who
other
wants
than
the weird babies?
pedophiles and sick people? Like who
Yeah.
would hang this on their wall or send this to a relative? Like,
creepy.
hey, check out my big black hat to show the leaders of this era. Is this showing, hey, we created babies?
Mhm.
We know they love their symbolism, and in the back, the stamp. I haven't looked into the details of like the goddess back there, but I'm sure
And the
it has.
Freemason hat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Freemason
I
hat.
mean,
Yep.
you just look at
So
this
creepy.
weird nonsense, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, is this a Titanic reference?
Yeah.
Like there's so much creep to this stuff.
So in this one, this red dress is more common. Most of the postcards that I found that were weird, like these, there's this woman in this red dress almost in every one. I don't know if you have too many more and you can keep,
Let's
but
see.
a lot of times the woman is in a red dress, and it was over and over. I seen something you had shown, and it was like, it immediately stood out to me. I was like, oh, anytime there was a woman, it was like a red dress. And all I could think
Really?
of was the
Yeah.
Scarlet Whore of
Look at,
Babylon.
there's red there.
Yep.
There's
And it was like immediate. It's
look
like,
at that.
yes. And there's like hundreds in where the woman is just
Look
in
at
red,
every
red,
single
red.
one.
And it immediately stood out to me, because if you know anything about Crowley and the Scarlet Whore of Babylon, let alone the Whore of Babylon in Revelations, it talks all about this woman, especially in Thelema, where it says the Scarlet Whore riding on the beast, she holds the cup of the Holy Grail, okay, love and death mingled with the elements of the sacrament of the Aeon. She is the mother of abominations.
Yeah.
The mother. So what are
And
abominations?
what's the biggest abomination?
Soulless people.
Yes.
Yeah. It creeped me
NPCs
out.
possibly.
Yeah. It creeped me out so much. I was like, whoa.
Well, and what's amazing is you look at a lot of the pictures from back. Actually, here I got one more I want to show you. This is a
Great.
video from 1896, I think. It's called where is she? Oh man. see. There's this video called the Flower Lady.
The
Oh, here it
Alice
is.
Guy movie.
Alice Guy, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is from 1896. And man, I don't know. Like I watched this and I was like, what is going on?
The fail show. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember this.
Oops. Hold on.
Here she goes.
And watch how she picks up the baby. She doesn't pick them up like they're real. Like, would you pick up a baby by the arm like that?
No,
She just
no.
drops it on
One
the
hand.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like they're real. Nobody would do this with a baby.
That's so creepy.
And that thing over on our right hand side in the middle, it looks like it's dead. She picks them up. Look at that. It's just, I don't know. The creep factor just gets to me.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't.
and she just flops them on the ground.
Yeah, picks it up by an arm, then just puts it down, boom, lets it
Yeah.
drop.
Yeah. And if they are real, they're very small. They're new. I mean,
they're relatively newborn, It's not like
Yeah.
these things are a year old.
oh my gosh. And it was remade. Do you know that movie was remade and the original is lost? All these movies are lost. All these silent era films are lost. And that is so sketchy to me. I'm like, okay, sure they are. Yeah, they're locked up somewhere because they're screwed up. And this one was the best of the screwed up worst. You know what I'm saying?
But and that's the other thing that people have to consider when they're looking at this stuff. It's not like you can go out there and research. I mean, with the orphan trains, you're a little more lucky. There's some documentaries out there that give you some information on them, but it doesn't go beyond a story or two. You don't understand the magnitude of this. We're talking about 250,000 kids, right? In a time when the population isn't 8 billion. No. We're talking maybe worldwide couple 100 million at this time,
and saving another 9,000 of the preemies. They say between 8 and 9,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's probably going real lowball, is my guess.
Absolutely. I mean, because they were doing that from the like I said, late 1870s, early 1880s on. So, and it got to the point where in the early around World War I, they were selling these things for home consumption, so you could buy an incubator and bring it home. Like, why do you need an incubator in your house? I mean, are there are there that many premature babies at this time? Because that doesn't make much sense either. Is there, I mean, I understand that infant mortality is a lot higher back then, but is there that much that we're
aren't making it? Yeah, the whole way.
It just it's all odd.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then so many of them, okay, you're doing this and that there's already this huge problem of, okay, we got all these other kids. We don't even know what to do with all these other kids.
Yeah.
Let's keep making the more kids stay alive that possibly could be a drain on the system, might have a lot of medical problems, blah, 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 blah. And where the hell are the moms? I'm sorry, but I'm a mom. I'm not going through, I don't care if it's 6 months or 9 months of torture on pregnancy and just giving my baby away. That's not happening. I mean, and then do it again and again because there's so many of them. What?
Well, and a lot of the tales are it got to a point where they had 4 and 5 kids and they couldn't keep up anymore. And then they had to get rid of them. What?
Weird.
I mean, I understand desperation brings people to do things, but I just don't see how you can give up 5 kids, or have it in you that all of a sudden now, and I mean, again, but if you think at Civil War time, A lot of women lost their husbands.
Right.
So you're going to have a lot of single women. And then, like we talked about before, what did they do to a lot of these women? They said they were crazy because, I mean, you look at the list of things that they could lock you up in an asylum for in the 1800s, and it's
Yeah.
comical. Women
It's
could
like
get,
PMS.
yeah, for menstruating. You could get
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
into an asylum for something that naturally occurs.
Yep. Or like not wanting enough sex. They had
Yeah,
like women being locked
masturbation was
up.
a
Yeah.
definite lockup. I mean, you got solitary confinement for that.
Yeah. That's so
You know, you
wild.
just go down the list of, I mean, it was asinine. There was probably about 80 different things on that list. And it's all, you know, it's trauma is what I
Yes.
look at when I look at these kids, because someone made a good comparison once and they said, look at Disney films, right? And if you look at the Disney films, and I think it's like between a 30 or 40-year window, there's 100 Disney films they sampled, and something like 93% of them had traumatic experiences with one of the characters.
Mhm.
And I think it was, you know, something like 60% had multiple instances of traumatic experiences. Now, these are supposed to be children's films. Why are we showing children being traumatized in
And they
these films?
never have parents. They never
No.
have parents. It's
That's
like
the other, I mean, you look
yeah.
at Disney and it's something like they have 56 movies with orphans in them. I mean, or,
Mhm.
you know, broken families. You always see, rarely do you see a mom, a dad, and children in a Disney
Right.
movie. It's always single parent, or they have no parent and they're going to live with an uncle or a
Wicked
stranger.
stepmothers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
it just doesn't make any sense. Like, how are we supposed to buy this? This is, you know, this is just blatantly telling us, okay, we got to this point in history, we're writing the story now, here's how it goes.
Yep.
And
And
I think
it's so true. That's so true.
and it goes back to what you said before. And one of my things is I tell people, hey, anytime you find an old video, download it. Anytime you can get your hands on an old book or a PDF, download it to your hard drive, save it, because things are getting taken down left and right now. I mean, the biggest thing is, one of my biggest sources when I started doing this stuff was archive.org. And you could get a lot of old reference books in PDF. And now I mean, they've had a few lawsuits against them. So what you can get off there is minuscule compared to what you used to be able to.
Wow.
So you're gradually seeing, and anybody that's seen Fahrenheit 451, that's kind of what they want to do. And you saw that during COVID. Anything that went against the narrative, they were burning it to the ground.
Oh yeah. And they'll
It,
continue because they're trying to do another reset. You can feel it. You can see
yes.
it. If you see what we're talking about here, and like especially old world stuff, if you see this for what it really is, when you look and step back from it, and the asylums and the repurposed buildings and the people and the new stories, and they all tell the same similar stories, they have all these weird like pamphlets of like, this is how you take care of a baby, like nobody knew what to do with the baby. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
if they cry, they're hungry. Like, who the
Yep.
hell doesn't know that? Why don't we know that? You know, I
Well,
don't
and
understand.
you look at these people at these fairs and the video that you have of the time, and they're walking around like they were placed somewhere where they have no idea where they are, no idea what's going on, and they're just trying to kind of get their bearings straight. They don't, it's
And they
really
like
like,
are weird about the sun. They're like always covered and
yes,
like kind of
umbrellas.
squinty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like hiding from the sun. They're always in these nice suits, but it's like 100 whatever summer,
Yeah, they're at the beach, full suit,
Yeah.
full dresses, you know, just sitting in the sands with an umbrella over
So
their head.
strange.
It just,
Yeah.
it doesn't make, excuse me, sense where, you know, where all the kids came from, where all these people came from, right? Because there's a lot of adults too that fall into this category. And that's what you know, the World Fair also served a dual purpose. It wasn't just to indoctrinate children, it was to indoctrinate adults. And it was a lot of these were to show you some of the old worlds and how we were going away from that. And this is what we are going to give you now. This is going to be your new alternative. This is where we're taking you. And, you know, this old stuff, forget about it.
Forget it. Because if
Yep.
you don't, we're going to lock you in the asylum.
Yeah.
And you're going to get beaten until you forget about it, until
Yeah.
the roses are all red.
So if we go back, you know, to relate to our times, anybody get a shadow ban on you know, Instagram, or anybody get kicked off of Twitter, or get a strike on YouTube? Well, back then you probably would have got locked in an asylum for that. That's the, you know, comparison that I would have for that. That's how little it took for you to get locked up.
Absolutely. And I mean, here we are replaying history. And if you don't think that they can't do it, watch what they do to Vegas and how quickly they can take buildings down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry, they can replace the strip every couple years. I live pretty close.
And not only that, how quickly can they rewrite a narrative or get a false narrative out there early that gets into the people's head? And then anyone that goes counter to that, now you're crazy, or you're why would you do that?
Why would you think that? Yeah. Why would you?
I get that a lot with the stuff that's going on in the Middle East, because people won't look at it and they're like, no, this is wrong, this is right, this is, and it's like, no, it's not as simple as black and white, right and wrong. I'm like, there's layers to this stuff. And when you start looking at the layers, you can make a little bit more educated decision and start seeing that what you're saying makes no sense whatsoever. Because if you take it anywhere,
they're on the same side. Yeah, they're on the same side. If you go look up the NWO type stuff, the whole situation with New World Order came out clear back when John D was one of the first people that came up with New World Order. And if you go look at some of all the councils that they're on, like WEF and all this, that they're both on the same thing. So if they're fighting a war, why are they both under the same regime type stuff? You know, they're not fighting. They're having dinner later. This is a joke. Like,
but they send the sacrificial lambs out there for slaughter, so that they have their footage and their pictures to show you how horrible everything is, and how they need more of your support and more of your trust and more of your obedience. And
we're just ants in a jar. Yep, they're shaking the jar full of ants, and that's all it is. Because these people have hatred for each other naturally. So if you do one little thing to set this off, it's going to go boom. It's pretty easy. And they're going to kill each other. You know, they're just allowing what they've tried to intervene on. They step back, then it goes forward, then they step back. It's just however much little pull they want to give them. Yeah. Like, you want to go today? Oh, okay. You know, it's all a game. It's a game.
If you don't think it's coordinated and orchestrated, answer me this. Almost to the day that this stuff kicks off in the Middle East, all of a sudden the stuff in Ukraine is like, oh, no, we're done. What? Ukraine? Who's no, we're in the Middle East now. That's old.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, you guys can forget about that. You can forget about all the billions we sent over there. No, just move. You know, it's like they take the Men in Black thing and they hold it to your boom, good. Forget about it. Move on. We're on to the next thing now, guys. Come on. Now you stand with Israel, or you stand with Palestine. It's like you can't. Ukraine, that's the old one. Forget about that one.
Well, and then if you want to go super conspiratorial, they had a huge earthquake at the same time that all this popped off in the Middle East. So are they manipulating things with electromagnetic, like we were talking about before, like energies, different things to get people riled up? Like, is there an anxiety factor? Is there like an irritation factor? Is there this? Is there that? With their messing with things? And it was a big earthquake. It was like 6.8. A whole bunch of people died. And they didn't mention one thing about it. Not one.
And there's no way they could possibly create an earthquake. So we know that was definitely natural. And,
Yes.
because what happened in Turkey, what was it?
Not very long.
2021 or they were going against the US, or maybe it was before that. They were going against the US on something in either Ukraine or Syria. And all of a sudden, a massive earthquake hits Turkey.
Yep.
It's just coincidental, but then you go and look at the patents of how we do have the ability to create earthquakes. And we do have the ability to manipulate weather if you look into it. And we do have laser beams that can be shot from the sky down, and that can be shot from the ground up through clouds.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
but this
The
is all
lasers,
conspiracy.
yeah, it's
Crazy stuff.
conspiracy. Well, and my uncle that I was telling you about, he tells me what things I can say and what I can't say. And he said the base that's right by Hawaii, right by wherever that happened, I can't remember the name of it. He said they've had that laser technology for years. He's like, at
Well,
least
there's
a
a harp
decade.
station there.
Yeah, he said it's been
Yeah.
a decade or more.
Yeah.
He was like, that's old news. He's like, well, I don't know why they're making a big fuss about saying we can't do this. Like, this is old news.
Yeah.
He literally told me that. And I was like, what? I mean, because but then you see things even at these old world fairs and they say, okay, there was no electricity. And then you've got electrical poles. Why are there poles?
Chicago is it's like, obviously it's my background, but it's my favorite topic in the world because it makes no sense. So supposedly they built this whole thing in about 18 months. This and an additional 185 buildings. They built 200 buildings in less than a year and a half. Most of them look like this in the background. They're just
with no people, with
out of
no
this
population.
Yeah. And
with no population at all.
They were moving everything by train or by ship, but we were able to get all the materials for this. Supposedly it's all built out of plaster and wood. But amazingly, at the end of the fair, what do? In typical ritual fashion, they burn it to the ground. And they knew this coming into it, right? Well, a lot of the guys that were part of the design team, now what they were designing and what they actually did, it's very debatable. But they said that this fair has to go out in a very similar manner to the way it came in. And to end it, they lit this statue behind me, this shoulder, is Columbia. And it was all gold. And they lit it on fire. And it was like a ceremony to end it all.
All right. And that's not anything to do with gods at all, right?
No. No, Columbia
We're being silly, people.
Columbia, has no ties to America or the old religions.
And definitely the District of Columbia does not as well.
No, but we are God-fearing people.
And the government loves you.
We are a Christian nation.
Yes. I mean, it's fun to talk with people when you can really say like what you think, because like you said, a lot of times you can, and then they'll be like, oh, especially me, because I'm a nurse and I work in the psych hospital. So they're like, okay, you have been at work too long.
Yeah. You might need to take a break.
No. And I mean, so much of the time, if you show them like A equals B and C, they're like, no, just A. I mean, they'll take some of it. Nobody throws it all out.
No.
But
well, see, I work in the corporate world. So and I work with a lot of like boomer type that are, hardcore, whatever is being pushed, they got it in their memo. And these guys, like I pushed them the whole, because I was known as the Trumper. Even though I wasn't a Trump guy, because I wouldn't get the jab. I wouldn't follow the mandates. Like I almost got fired. I lost one job, but I almost got fired from this job because I wouldn't take it. And they just banned me from campuses and wouldn't let me on site or anything. So, but these guys, I slowly started dropping drip about this stuff. And after being the crazy guy, after like 2 years, I've had 3 of them finally say, wow, I really started seeing what you were saying and it wasn't so crazy. I'm like, well,
it's not so crazy now, huh?
Yeah. And he's
Especially
like,
now.
after what happened the last couple of years and seeing what you're saying, because I'm not going to go out there and drop the fake moon landing on these guys. I'm dropping like, elementary
Small things.
stuff on
Right.
them that they can go
Right.
look up themselves, like fluoride in the water and,
Mhm.
poison in your food. How come they can sell it in America, but they can't sell it in Europe? And
Right.
they start looking at that and like, wow. And I'm like, you ever think maybe they're trying to make you sick?
Mm.
And then they start seeing that, and then you're like, okay, now what about big pharma? How do they heal you? How much money do they make to heal you? They never heal you, do they? No, they put a band-aid on you, and now you're in their system until the day you die. And they're
Mhm.
like, wow, I never saw it like that. I'm like, yeah, it's a factory. It's a sickness factory. That's all
Yep.
it is.
This
There's
was
nothing
created
out.
well, and it's all Rockefeller, type structure of everything. Like you
Mhm.
go through any of it and it all goes back to these big players,
Well, what do
you
you,
know.
my thing is always, I ask people, I go, okay, so what did people in the old times do without
Mhm.
a bottle to go past? They just all died when they got sick. None of these people healed. And I said, you know what? The other thing you need to think about, a lot of the diseases we have today, the dis-ease, didn't
Mhm.
exist back then. It's created, it's
Yep.
been thrust upon us. It's been put into us,
Yep.
whether it's physical or mental, it's part of the game now. And you have to understand that. And then when you see it, you realize then trying to get out, you're like, because I see a lot of stuff, but there's only so much you can do about it, in your life without driving yourself crazy too.
Right.
And that's the balance you have to take is listen, and take as many precautions as you can. But if you think you're going to get out unscathed, good luck.
Right. Yep.
And
And you have to balance it all. It's like, yeah, I mean, especially me, because I'm still a nurse. Like, and I still,
yeah,
I mean, I got really sick last year and I definitely needed antibiotics. Why did I get sick? That was the doctor. But long story short, I almost died. I'm grateful that I'm alive and I'm grateful for antibiotics at that
yeah.
time. However, it wouldn't have been how bad it was if he would have just listened to me in the first place. I
Yep.
told him I was allergic to glue, and the crazy asthma girl, you put the glue in, just a different brand. Great idea. Like, yeah, I
Well,
didn't react well,
the thing that kills me is my son had a roaring double ear infection last year. And so he's literally on the couch in tears. And I'm like, all right, buddy, we're going
All
to
right. So
the
I was
Minute
saying,
Clinic
like, I knew
and
I
we're
was
going to
going to
get
get
you
crucified probably for
we're going
putting
to
out
get
the
you
Christmas tree
some
because
meds.
I know
So
it's
I
not,
get
I
him
know
some
what it is. I know it's
amoxicillin. Well,
Saturnalia. I
I
know what it
ended up
is. I'm
getting a
going to do
double
a
ear
show
infection
about
at the
it.
same time. So
I
we
know
had it
what it is.
together.
But also,
And
I don't think
so we were
everything that
both
you
on it.
do
And I put a
has to
picture
be
on
like, we
Instagram
have to
and
stick
people
to
are like,
this
oh,
very
you're such a
thing. And that's
sellout.
all
You
because
talk a
now
big
we're
game,
also
but
in a
then you go to
cult.
big
If we
pharma.
do
I'm like,
that and
well,
we have
when
to
your
be that
son is
stringent
crying
and
in
I can't
pain, you
have
will
the
do
memories with
anything
my
to get
kids and
him
my
out. Now,
family
do I
without
have to
feeling
do
like I'm
extra
doing
work
some crazy
afterwards
thing,
because I
even
gave
if
him
you know
something that
about
will
it, your
damage his gut biome?
intention
Yes,
is
I know
everything.
it. And
That's
we
what
will do
occultists
that
talk
after the
about.
fact. But
That's what I was
going to
in
say.
the short
I was going to
term.
say it's your intention.
We're going to
Take care of it because
We're not going
if
to
you
black
put
pill
it
everything.
up with negative connotations, sure.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm celebrating Saturnalia,
Yeah.
participating that way.
Exactly. But it's, and I get sick of these people that want us to live these Puritan lives, this no fun, no nothing, just live a miserable existence and be like me. It's like, no, you
Yeah.
miserable twat. There's no
Yeah.
way I'm going to do that. There's a reason
Well,
why you're miserable.
and
You
we
don't have
know
to.
just because
Yeah.
big pharma is bad doesn't mean antibiotics are bad. It means they use it to their advantage.
Yes.
If it like with mine, I had osteomyelitis in my spine. I would have died. I needed a PICC line. Like I wasn't a little sick. I was going to die. And so if I didn't have medical intervention, I know as a nurse, I would not be here right now because once it crosses that spinal column, you're kind of in deep shit, even with medical intervention, which is
Yep.
where I was at. But I also know I'm going to go get help. And people say to me, oh, you work you work at the psych place with knowing what they do to people. I'm like, I've also helped a lot of people, whether or not you want to believe that or not. Like the place I work, they do a lot of EMDR therapy. We do ketamine therapy. We do all kinds of stuff that helps people that are combat veterans that have real freaking trauma that you have no idea what that is, and I've watched them come in as not okay and go out as a whole nother person. I'm not talking the old days where they just drugged them and let them go. They're processing. They handle things a lot different now. I wouldn't work at the state hospital where they're just jabbing and slabbing them, like slam them on the ground, pump them full of drugs. I would not do that. That's against me, like who I am as a human being. But also I'm not going to throw out every bit of knowledge I learned. And just because I work for the medical industry, like I also go to work and smile and pray for people that they have no idea that I do that for them,
Yeah.
So,
And even going back to the Christmas thing, like I wasn't in the Christmas spirit for 2 years. Like right after I got
it's hard
divorced,
once
it
too.
was it was 2020. I had woken up, the whole deal. And I was in a shitty little apartment, and I'm like, you know what, buddy? I'm like, we're not getting a Christmas tree this year. He's like, that's fine.
Right.
He's like, I got one at mom's house anyway. I don't care. And and so last year I got into, I'm in a rental house now, a little more human environment, and I was feeling a little better about myself, my situation. And I'm like, buddy, you want to get a tree this year? And he's like, yeah. So
Aww.
we went, picked one out, put it up, did all the light, knowing full well
Right.
it's
That you're hanging
all
dicks
the
on your tree. It's
yeah.
fine.
And I'm like, you know what? And then so we did it, and he goes to school and comes home a couple weeks later with a little, he had to do a writing assignment, and he wrote about how much it meant to him that
Aw.
me and him put up a Christmas tree in my place because we hadn't done it for a couple years. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, okay, anybody that has anything to say
Yeah.
negative,
Go
I
screw
hate
yourself.
you right now,
Yeah.
like,
Why
because this
why
is
do
the
we
most,
have to why do we okay, as anybody in this community, why do especially you, because you're like great deception stuff, like you're revealing things to people, like this is the problem here, and here we are. Okay, so here's the thing. It doesn't matter what we know. It doesn't matter what we show you. It doesn't matter all this studying if we can't be ever happy.
yep,
Like, come on,
still got to
we still got
live.
kids. We still got
Yeah.
kids, you know. I mean, I don't want to. My son told me, he said, Mom, I like your podcast. He's 16. And he said, I won't listen to the one on Christmas because he loves Christmas. He is
Yep.
my kid that like just helps me. He just loves Christmas. And he said, I know you told me a little bit about it, and I don't want to know any more than that. And he knows that it's probably not good. And I said, yeah, it's a rough one if you don't know. And he's like, then I don't want to know. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's okay.
And you don't have to, it's not something that if you don't know it, it's one of those things that you're being ignorant. No, it's small.
Does it help your
of
life? Right. Is
yeah.
this changing your world? Like, come on.
Are we saving the world if we don't celebrate Christmas?
On Easter,
That's where
we know
we're
what
getting
Easter
to.
is too. We know,
I mean, you can't even say
they're
the
all
C
pagan
word in public
holidays.
school anymore.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's just like, oh, happy holidays, we mean.
Yes.
Yes. No, I'm not doing that. I won't do that. But
I'll never do that. I'll say it to anybody. Even if you got a little yarmulke on, I'm still saying Merry Christmas. I don't care.
Exactly. You're not
it's
hurting anyone. You're giving them good intention, right? You're bringing good tidings and cheer. Did people forget that part of it?
And nothing makes me laugh harder than someone who gets offended when you say Merry Christmas. I literally laugh in their face when they get mad and start yelling at you. I just laugh because I'm like, really? I'm like, that's where your life's at. That's what triggers you. Okay.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, at the end of the day, like just because we're in this community, it is a community. I'm happy for it. I've never had a lot of, I'm a loner. I think most of us are. I don't know for you, but For me, like I never felt like I fit in anyways. So not fitting in wasn't that big of a deal. It was just actually making it into a place now where I'm like, oh, these people, I really like this person. Oh, I've got to know these people. Wow, there's some cool people in this community, because we are more the outcasts. But just because we are doesn't mean we don't want some semblance of normalcy. Like, come on, sometimes you got to get out of the black pill. It's rough. If you're a black pillar all the time, that's rough.
I can't imagine that existence. It's got to be miserable because you will literally drive yourself insane because it's it's a system that's not meant to benefit you in at every turn when you look at it, and you are conditioned, you are programmed to trust authority, to obey, to believe, and it's all nonsense. It's all inversion, right? And that's what one of the big things in my realm is that everything is inverted, and they are trying, whoever they are, is pushing us to an unnatural way of life, a synthetic way of life versus the natural way. When we go back to talking about the old buildings and everything, that's more natural. It's connected with God's creation. It's uses natural materials. It's using, whether it's the Fibonacci sequence or sacred geometry in its construction to harness and utilize and work with the environment, whereas everything that's done today in the synthetic world is going against the natural environment.
Well, and if people really want to know how to fight back, and I hate to explain this to Christians because I'm a Christian podcast, but this is the truth. If you want to know about Christianity and how to keep yourself safe and well, and a lot of other things, you have to study the occult. And I'm sorry, you don't have to go totally down that rabbit hole, but you have to have a basic knowledge because, like what you're saying, is anything they flip on its head or say this is good or this is the way, like you said, what's down is up, what's up is down. So if you want to understand it or know why are they doing this to me, that's the number one question. Why would they do that? If you want to know that, it's out there, but you're not going to find it in a place that you want to find it and still feel like, I never talk about demons. Oh, I don't believe in demons. I don't talk about this or that. And I'm like, well, then how come King James put out 3 books about demons too?
Yeah, you're not going to go to CNN and find a good article on demons,
no.
or it's not something that you have to do a little research and go outside of the mainstream and go to what are considered, subject matter experts in that area. And, and when you read this stuff, are you supposed to eat it up, hook, line, and sinker? No. You're supposed to take it in, disseminate it, and then do what you want with it.
No, your enemy.
If you're going to automatically reject, or on the opposite side, automatically accept it as fact, then you have a problem. You have, because there's that middle ground, right? They always say there's 3 sides to every story. And that's the way I look at history, because I feel like there's the history that they've told us, which is his story. Then there's the alternate history, which is our story. And then there's something in between, which is kind of a melting of what really happens, because I think on their end, they've lied. I think on the alternate side, we've made some stuff up because we don't know. And based on myth.
We are a country that has lost our history. You don't find this in other countries. And it is sad. It is actually sad. We are a representative of the orphan trains in America, not just them as orphans. We are orphans because they tore down everything with fire. They've torched everything, or they've repurposed it and lied to us. That's how I feel anyway.
Well, Graham Hancock puts it great. We're a society with amnesia, right? We forget everything. And if it's, especially now in today's day and age, we're in that, what is it, down to 3-second attention span, something like that. But if what you're saying is absolutely true, you have go back and Google any of the major major cities, even around you, and put fire next to it in the 1800s, or
I've
old
done it.
fire, and you will see every city, every major city has at least one, if not two or three major fires. And I know that in a lot of these places we're talking about wooden structures, but in a lot of these places we're talking about brick and stone structures that burn.
Yeah, that
Not
doesn't
necessarily
happen.
burn. When you look at the pictures, it looks like they exploded, but we're told they burnt to the
Yes.
grounds.
And then what is left, or what, like I said about, I was going to bring picture of the Salt Lake City temple, but if you look at it and you look at it closely, it was already there. And the things that are, it's built with a moon, with the phases of the moon on the underneath, in like the actual like platform of one part of it. It's got like all these weird cloud stones, sunstones, weird Masonic stuff. I don't think, they're always trying to say, and it's got like the swastika star, all kinds of creepy crap. And they're like, oh no, this is for the Lord. And I'm like, right. Okay, I don't think half of this stuff was here. I think they saw that building, recognized it because they were Masons, and said, we're going to use this, and maybe they made some additions and changes. I do think they changed the top of it. It used to look kind of like Solomon's temple, and now it looks very cathedral-like, which it did have a antenna thing on the top too back in the day, but now it doesn't. It has the golden angel Moroni up there, which the whole story with Joseph, it very, very much mimics that of John Dee. I'm, and same with same thing with Thelema and the Book of the Law. Like everybody thinks they only ever remember Lamb, but there was another. Awas came first. And so with occult studying, I found all this stuff, and it's not something like literally preparing for this. And I knew I was going to talk about the Scarlet Woman and talked about a lot of things. So I wanted to really brush up again. And after about 4 hours at work the other night, I was like, my brain is going to explode because I'm listening to this really creepy crap, and my friend goes, why are you doing that? And I'm like, because you do need knowledge, but I don't say this lightly. Like, I'm not saying every person, if you're terrified of certain things, or you're not not religious, that's a bad word because I don't go to church.
It's more spiritual.
Yeah, spiritual.
Yeah.
If you're not prepared to be a warrior, don't be a warrior. Some people aren't. Some people don't go to battle. Some people make dinner, for the soldiers.
And the problem with that
it's all
is
important.
The problem with that is if you go in with a low vibration or any trepidation or fear, you are opening yourself up, especially when you're doing occult studies, to who knows what. And that's my thing, is that the way, when you look into this stuff and when you research it, and it's not something to be played with, because everything, it feels like in this realm, is a spell, right? And from
that's why they
words,
quit teaching writing in school.
Yes,
that. Yeah, it's
true.
Yeah,
they're again, and what does that do? Again, it's a dumbing down of society. And it's funny you say that, because I was listening to the old, Eisenhower speech, where he gives his farewell address, and he's talking about the military industrial complex, and you listen to it, and the way he's talking to the people, he is talking to a much more educated populace than what if he tried to talk like that today, so many people would not even understand what they'd have their Siri ups. Hey Siri, translate this for me. Right? Because he can't understand what he's talking about. And they have dumbed us down to a point where the spells are so simplistic and the programming is so, funneled into this one area, that if you don't open your eyes to it, you are just stuck in it.
And also, I do want to make clear, when I study these things, I don't ever buy the books, except I have some books on John Dee, but I will not buy Crowley's books. I will read them online, but I will not buy them in my house, because I'm not having that here. This is my home. Yeah.
I did that. I it's funny you say that.
It's hard.
I bought a Freemason book, like an expensive one. It was one of the rare ones. I was like on an auction or somewhere. And as soon as I bought it, 3 things went wrong. I sold that son. I got it out of that. I kept it in the garage and then I sold it. And I'm like, this thing has bad juju to it. I never even read the thing. I never even got to open it. But I was like, I got to get rid of this thing. I don't know what it is. But as soon as I brought that book into the house, it was chaos.
Well, and so many of these people nowadays, like you were saying, like, and it's not just dumbing down, like the public school system was really a way for them to control everything that we know. Meanwhile, where do their kids go? They send their children away to magical schools, to completely different schools than what we have. I mean,
Next
if you
level.
watch Harry Potter, like it's literally showing you, oh, and this is what the people do. And they send their kids away to go learn about all this magical, schooling stuff in another place. Like that's literally these schools are not. And people always say, well, then how do you find out about those schools? And I just looked at the last lady I did one with, and I said, you're not in the bloodline. You're never going to know.
You are invite
Yeah.
only.
You're not going to
It's a
find
big
that out.
club.
Yeah. You're not going to be. You might get to it and know where it's located, but that's
I hate
it.
to break it to you. They're not advertising on your podcast either.
No,
they're not like
no.
looking for new enrollees. It's very invite only. Yeah. I mean, and that's, people don't understand the concept of like Bilderberg even, or these big groups like that, how could that be? Well, you don't understand. You are comparing it to your life experience. You don't understand the darkness and the demons that are out there, the power hungry people that run this world. They're different creatures than us.
The reason why it's called mystery schools, there you go, mystery. They're not going to just come at you. Plus, like you said, even if they did, let's pretend in a better whatever world they want to give us all the knowledge, okay, which they'll never do. How many people would understand it? Number one. Number two, how many people would give a shit? Like, really? A handful of us? I mean, like, how many people study anymore? Like, I'm constantly studying now. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly delving into tons of things, not just occult stuff either, just whatever. And I want to learn. How many people care about that anymore? It's worrisome.
Most people don't have time for it, and it's set up that way, right? That's not something that was done by accident. It was planned. It started when they started bringing the women into the workforce. So now the children becomes dependent on the system. Now the child is away from the family more than it's with the family, and you've created more workers, right? And it's this whole system. Now both parents are working, they come home, you got to make dinner, you got to get the kid fed, bathed, you got to get their homework done, all this stuff in a short. Meanwhile, you just worked 8 to 10 hour shift. Now you're coming home, got to do this. Where's the time to study? Where's that?
Exactly.
And they've set up this lifestyle for people where they've made it so you can't educate yourself unless you're willing to set aside the time. And most people aren't, because what do? They come home, they want to unwind. How do they unwind? They're programmed by the television. Most people don't go home. I mean, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot, the majority of people do not go home and open up a book. They go home, they turn on the TV, and they get programmed. And they don't even know that.
I think the television is one of the best things I've given up since I've been in podcasting, and not on purpose. Sometimes I'll get to watch it, but like, I'm busy now, and I'm sure you find the same way, like even other people's podcasts, like if I'm going to spend time, that's what I want to do. I want to catch up on that first before I watch some mindless program. And even if I do have the TV on, most of the time I'm doing something. I'm not really paying attention. And it's never anything with commercials or whatever. I'm out of that whole rat race.
Yeah. Oh, it was so painful when I went back, because I took like 3 years off of cable. And then when I moved into this rental house, they have cable here. It's part of the package. So I was like, all right. And my son will watch everything. But when you start seeing commercials again, you're like, oh my God. I'm like, this is unbelievable. Every other one, if not 2 out of the 3 or 3 out of the 3 in the segment, are pharmaceuticals. If not, they've got some fucking trans lifestyle, not anything but the nuclear family in it, and promoting all these weird products. Since when has women's lady parts grooming become such I see 8 commercials on it.
Yeah, that's so I know, like, just my grandpa wasn't that old, and he's only been gone about 12 years. He would literally have a fit if he saw the stuff nowadays.
Oh, that
like,
generation. Yeah.
yeah, he would be like, what the hell is wrong with you people? Because he couldn't even watch one about a maxi pad, so I can't even imagine.
There's a reason
Nowadays,
that
he would
generation
be,
died off, and
yeah.
because they would not stand for this.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
My grandfather's the same way. If they saw this stuff, they'd be rolling over in their grave right now, like laughing at it.
And even as hardworking as they were, even as much as they could do, I'm with you. There's no way they built some of these buildings. Sorry,
no,
I'm not buying it. Like, there's
no,
no way.
and just look at the scale, right? Why would you have 30 and 40-foot doors? I just, oh, it's for ventilation. Oh, it's for light. Oh, it's no, it doesn't make
Because
sense.
what about heat? Like, what about
Yeah.
keeping the heat in? That
Well, they have
that
those
doesn't.
those mini little fireplaces, that
Yeah,
heat the
they're
entire
so tiny.
castle.
Yeah.
I always, and that's one of the things that always irked me about I was big, like, medieval guy growing up as a kid. I loved castle movies and medieval movies. And I always wondered that. I'm like, how do they keep these castles warm with just that one little fireplace? These
Tiny.
ceilings are 15, 20
Huge.
feet high, in just a regular room, let alone going into like a dining hall where they're like 30
Yeah.
feet high,
Yeah,
and you only
exactly.
have
And
one
it's
fireplace.
freezing. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
freezing. And most of the time you're by a river or some water area, which makes it even more cold. And
Yep.
so I don't think so. Like, I've been to Versailles, and there's no way. And a little FYI to people, originally not one bathroom. Not one.
That's the thing that
Why?
puzzles me. Well,
Why?
they did love to poo out windows, though.
Yeah,
Those
they did
Europeans
that.
were disgusting. That's one of the things that's rarely brought up, is how savage the Europeans really were compared to the rest of the world. Like, they didn't have plumbing, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have a lot of the things like this. The Native American, think about all the diseases they spread around the world. Like, and
But
they go pull all these.
the
Yeah.
aqueducts alone, the machine and everything they made in Versailles to run the fountain, but no toilet.
Yeah.
What? You made aqueducts and you had enough wherewithal to create this beautiful gardenry with like tons of water because it's up a hill. So they had to make that machine. I can't remember what it's called, to help pump the water up and all of this stuff. But you didn't have the wherewithal to think, what are we going to do with all the poo? I don't think so. I don't think they made it. I'm like, I don't think so. Same thing
Well,
with the fireplaces. I think they were heaters, some
and
sort of heating system,
the fire.
like
Oh,
vents.
absolutely. Radium, some sort of radium
Yeah.
heating,
Yep.
where,
Absolute.
because you weren't burning wood, and it
Mm-mm.
wasn't going to generate
It's too
enough heat
small.
from
Yeah, they're
that.
too.
Yeah.
It's not a.
How are you
It wasn't.
circulating it? Right?
Yeah.
The heat from a fireplace doesn't just emanate out in a large
No.
room. It's going to only go out a couple feet, and
Yep.
the other side
That's
of the
it.
room
You're
is
done.
going to be ice cold. It
Mm.
makes no sense. And why do you have the metal in there with, again, that with the balls that look like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they could have mercury in them?
Yeah.
And I'm no electrician, but it just, again, doesn't make sense. It just doesn't
Yeah.
add up. And to say that there was no electricity except for combustion electricity, it doesn't make sense, especially when you start looking into ley lines, you look into possible free energy. Like, I mean, as
Mhm.
late as Tesla was working on it.
Oh yeah. I absolutely think there was definitely way more advanced things, because even the old Egyptian carvings, you can see different little things with electricity. Like
We're made to believe that we're the most advanced creatures ever, right? When in
no, we're not.
reality, it's looking like there was much more advanced creatures prior to us, and we're trying to catch up. And you know, my example always is the pyramids. Go back, you know, no one can explain how they were built, why they were built, what sort of function they serve, because we've been told it's a tomb, and there's never been a body found in one of them.
Mhm.
So
And then
it's just,
there's like a hospital type frequency. Have you heard about this in Egypt, where you can still go there and you can put your ear or something by it, or put your arm, and you can feel the frequency, but like they block it off so you can only do it a little bit because it's so strong. And I'm like, there's something about that. That makes more sense.
well,
I can't remember.
and what makes that even crazier is those things have been semi castrated, right? The
Mhm.
exterior coating has been taken off of them. The tip of the pyramid has been taken off. So it's much like when you look at a lot of these old buildings, what's the first thing they do? They chop the spire, right?
Mhm.
And it's cutting off any connection. And that's again the natural versus unnatural. When I go to that synthetic, they wanted to force us to that Rockefeller, the allopathic, the oil-based system. And you couldn't have things like airships. You couldn't have things like cars that ran on free energy. You know, you couldn't have these types of things because there was no way to monetize them. And that's what people don't understand, is that a lot of these fires that took place in the late 1800s, what did they destroy? In look at most every city, at least one of the fires destroyed the place where they kept all the records. So what did
Mhm.
that erase? It erased all the land ownership, the land deeds. So now you could
Right.
parcel out the land however you want. A lot of the times it also burnt the patents. So
Mhm.
people that had things patented, now all of a sudden that patent burnt away. Now somebody with a big pocketbook comes in and says, "This is mine. I just invented this." And now that's how they rewrote it. I mean, you see it here a lot with a lot of you know, I hate to say it this way, but a lot of the things that were invented by Black people, it was erased and reinvented by a white guy, you know,
Mhm.
just
Yep.
conveniently. Some European or some, you know, settler all of a sudden decided, came up with this idea, you know, and
Why do you
it's,
think they always leave one building? You know how they always leave the one for the
that's to show
fairs?
you, because I think they have to, I think
Revelation of the
I hate
method.
the whole karmic idea, you know, that, but I think there's something to it. They have to show you that it's there. And I think it's still that connection, because I think these buildings have a life force to them in their own, you know, and I think they are part of a larger grid, larger network at one time that were
Right.
interconnected. And now were they interconnected in the sense that, you know, one over here in America was connected to one in Europe? No, I think they were connected in the sense that they served a purpose. And if that was what you needed, that's where you went, you know. And I
Okay.
think with a
Yeah.
lot of these
Yep.
cathedrals, different cathedrals get worked at different frequencies, so they would have different healing purposes. So, you know, like you were saying before, they didn't have pews in these cathedrals. People go lay on the floor. Well, the really sick folks would go in the basement, and they'd spend
Mm.
days in the basement until they were healed, and then they would come out after drinking the water that was down below, coming from the source, with the frequencies being emanated by the building, working with the water and healing people. They swore by that in the old times. That's how people went to these churches or cathedrals as healing centers. I don't think they were places of worship originally. I think
I
they
don't
were
think
the
so either.
yeah. And think about, again, we go back to inversion. What did they become? They became control centers. When in the past they
Mm-hmm.
were freedom, they were healing, they were releasing you. Now they were constricting, they were confining, they were narrowing your abilities.
Well, and it makes sense to me what you're saying, like all of a sudden dinged in my brain that it literally replicate one of their actual things that they do in their ceremonies is they go beneath to be reborn. You know, if you become part of some of these clubs, you have to go through a rebirth ritual, which like you go beneath and it's like a death and you rise above for rebirth, which maybe they were emulating from some of these places because that's exactly what it
Well, and
sounds like
they
they were
with a lot
doing.
of these places too. What they would do
Mm-hmm.
is they would just, they would destroy a lot of these buildings, they'd keep the foundation and build their building on top, same land, same spot, but now they were going to put their energy into it. And a lot of these cathedrals,
And tunnels too. Yeah.
yes, a lot of underground, and a lot, because a lot of these cathedrals were pagan areas of
Mm-hmm.
worship, and they
Yep.
say they didn't get rid of a lot of the relics, they just put them down in hiding. So they kept
Mm-hmm.
all of this old pagan stuff and just put the new dressing on top, and a lot of the old worship didn't go away either.
The
And
one story I was telling you about Rome, that temple of Minerva was underneath the Catholic Church. They built a Catholic church on top of it. And that's what we were visiting. And we went below because this guy was like kind of famous. It was a weird thing that happened to us because we shouldn't have been on the tour. We weren't invited. He's famous. He like is on movies and like 300 and like he does these fancy tours for celebrities and the Kardashians because I thought he was full of it and I wasn't going to go because he comes up to me and he's this big muscly guy and I'm like, you better walk the other way. My husband is getting a sandwich. He's coming right back. He's as big as you know, and I'm like, he's a redhead. He's not going to like you. Walk away. And I was like, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And he's like, no, 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 no. And I was like, yeah, sure. You're going to give us a special deal. And he's like, no, no, really. And it was weird because he sought us out and we weren't supposed to be there. And then all of a sudden we're on this off-grid tour where he has special access and all that stuff happened with my daughter. And it was just such a weird, now looking backward, being as normal as I was then, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Cause the Kardashian, now I'm like, oh my gosh, what were you
yep,
doing? It's a whole nother, it's a different, oh my gosh.
just
But
feeding the
yeah,
beast.
yeah, exactly. So I have one more question for you because I know I've kept you forever. And all right, I'm just gonna say one word and we'll see what you think. Clonade. Yeah, do you know about Clonade?
Yeah, it's, oh man,
It's weird, huh?
it's so weird because you think about it too, and then you see what's been popularized. They popularized the Clone Wars with Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars. Out of all things, they came out with the
Yeah.
Clone Wars. And I don't know. I mean, as far as them being able to clone, specific people, I think it's difficult, right? I think they've tried, but here's the thing, you have to be able to age these things also, right? So I think that there's stages to it. So I don't know. I'm not sold on the whole Biden's a clone thing. I'm more into the idea of prosthetics and
Yeah.
masks and things like that and bodysuits. But is it absolutely possible that there are cloning? I think absolutely. Because what did we talk about
Yeah.
before?
I
Unnatural,
think so.
synthetic.
Yep.
What are
I
they
think
trying to
they
do? They're trying to play
Well,
God.
yeah, they said that in 2000. So it was such a weird thing that I ran across. Said in 2003, they came out on a press conference, Clonade did. And this lady that's their vice president or something, she came out and she's French and she said, oh, we did it. The first baby, her name is Eve, a
Yep.
girl, of course, named Eve, right? And then they kind of fell off. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I'm watching is like a 60 minutes from 4 or 5 years ago. And they're like, oh, we are going to clone the I'm like, wait a minute. I've seen this girl before. I didn't place it at first, but this isn't crazy. Like, back fringe things. This was on CNN and 60 minutes. Okay. So I'm watching it and I'm like, I know then this weird guy, cause he dresses all crazy. And I'm like, I've seen this before. So I went back and researched it and I'm like, they already did this. They said they did this already. And I think that they definitely know. I
Well, they
think
gave us Dolly the sheep,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're going, oh, okay. And acting like they've never done anything else. Now,
Mm-hmm.
is it
Why
at
would
the
you
level,
stop?
is
Yeah.
it at the Q level where, they have these dungeons, subterranean layers all over the country that are loaded with, these clones and are celebrities cloned and things? I don't think so yet. I definitely think they do human animal experiments. I think they've created chimeras and things like
Oh,
that and
definitely.
hybrids. Absolutely. But
I think if they're cloning anything and having success, it would be on a baby, like a baby level, like cloning to make a baby, not necessarily making a full grown, like cloning me right now at this level of my
correct.
life, like
Yeah.
they could make maybe a baby me,
Yeah.
and make
They
another
could
one.
take your DNA
Yeah.
and make something. Now, is it going to be an exact replica of you? I don't think they're there.
Who even
I mean,
knows?
they may
Yeah.
be, but I just don't see it. Because I think it would be
And
more prevalent.
that goes to the spirit of it goes back to the lady, the Scarlet Woman, and being the horror of abominations, because if they are like an NPC, or I personally, for me, I feel like they're a vessel for the Nephilim that are dead, because they are lost and wandering in the desert, always looking for a place to be. And so I think a lot of it is this God worship to these gods, that are Anunnaki, Nephilim, whatever you want to call them. That I feel like a lot of times it goes back to the gods, and that
Yes.
they have these spirits they need to house, not necessarily. They don't care about making a new me, like, unless I fit somebody's bill of what they want to look like, but
You just
otherwise, no.
absolutely nailed Hollywood. You nailed politics. You nailed all of it. It's They need vessels for these
Vessels.
demonic spirits, for these
Yes.
entities, because they cannot create physical bodies. So they have to find souls or vessels
They make
to
deals with those people. Those people give it up on their own. Those people are
exactly.
inhabited.
They
Yes.
willingly exchange it for Babylonian money magic, for
Mm-hmm.
all the gifts and treats. Now, there's other folks that give it away, I think, by trauma, by being in
Yeah.
low frequencies. I think you're more susceptible when you're in it, that kind of state, when you're in a traumatized, a demoralized state. I think you're
Like a
more,
MK Ultra type state. Yeah.
yeah,
Like a
where,
weird,
where you're
programming
open,
state. Yeah.
to those. Because the way I look at it, like I see us as radios, right? And we put out a frequency. And for me and you to be able to communicate, we have to be able to receive the same station. So if I'm driving and, I get to your station and it's all static, well, we can't communicate. We can't talk. And I think that's the way the spirit world works also, in a sense that if you're on a certain frequency, you are more susceptible to those entities. Now, if you're at a higher frequency, I think you're more, spiritually sound, or,
Mm-hmm.
your soul is more valued than giving it up for some money. I think I absolutely. And I think that's what possibly these clones could be, are soulless avatars that
Mm-hmm.
are vessels for entities that they know are out there, but they don't have a host.
There's no way to, there's only so many people they can ascertain by, like, Hollywood or whatever. That's only going to fulfill such a small amount,
Yes.
and then the rest are going to need to come from somewhere, because there's a lot of people like me and you that are like no, I'm not
Yeah.
about this. Like, I know who God is and I don't need a building or like any of the shit. Like, I know what it is. Like, I got it. I got it. I'm good. And a lot of people can't be bought. And that's where they want us to be. And I know from I was traumatized at a pretty high level and then put into basically a cult for most of my life till I was 34. I was in Mormonism and I didn't even know. Like I knew this. I was sick all the time. I was miserable all the time. I've never been fatter, more miserable, unhealthy, unattractive. People will look at me back then and say, that can't even be, that's like not you.
Who
My
is
husband always
that,
said,
right?
yeah, my husband laughs and he's like, it's not just the weight, but you look like related to you, like maybe like your sister, not my real one, but like it could be a sister.
Yeah.
And he's like, but it honestly doesn't look like you. Like everything has changed. And I'm like, because everything did change
Yeah.
when you get away from it and you develop your soul. And that doesn't mean church is never going to get you here, people. And I'm not disrespectful to any person that likes to go to church. If you want to go to church and commune with others, that is amazing. But 2 or more in his name is church. And you don't have to go to every little thing and do every little thing that they say. Like, take it a step at a time and read the Bible and get to know God. Like, just figure that out, And
Try
if
it
you
on your
do
own
that,
before you go to
yeah,
somebody else, see if you
exactly.
can make a
Read the
connection
book.
on your own. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's out there.
Oh, and people won't do it a lot of times. If you talk to Christians, a lot of them have they do not spend time reading the Bible, but they spend time in church. They spend time doing other things, which is all admirable. I'm not like docking it at all. Like I spend a lot of my time serving my fellow man as well, but I
But a
don't do
lot
it
of that,
because
though,
someone
Heidi, is
told me to. Yeah,
superficial on
it
their
can
part.
be.
You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? It's
Yep.
I'm doing it to show that I show up. I'm not, their soul isn't there, so to
Yeah.
speak. They're
They're
just
just checking
doing
off
it.
the box.
It's the
Yeah.
thing to do. Yes. And
Yep.
that's my problem with organized religion is a lot of those people are the most screwed up people and the
Oh.
most perverted people out there because they suppress it all because
Mm-hmm.
they just want to do that. It's the
Yes.
thing I had to do, but the real me is this person, and
Yep. They get out later and they ruin their families or implode everything at some point in their life because they didn't get to live a certain way or whatever they want to do. But the thing is you never realize what you're taking down with you,
Yep.
And you have to step away from yourself. And really, people don't do this anymore because what are we? We are in Crowley's world of everyone is a star.
Well,
Right? Everyone is a star.
did you see the
Yeah.
movie that's coming out today? It's called The Shift. And it's what if Satan was on the world today and what would he do? So he's just a regular guy and he's living amongst us. And it looks great.
I'll have to look at it. Yeah, I like movies still. I still go. I'm gonna check it out because
if it's good, it's worth, a good movie. But the problem is, I think one of the things that's happened with this whole synthetic route is we've lost creativity. If you look from, you can track it kind of to like the 60s. The creativity, you've seen a significant spike in technology, but at the same time, a significant increase or decrease in creativity. It's
because everybody stopped being like, and also I feel like it was because we became more like in the 80s, they got really like reformed into like the suits, like everybody was like, oh, we got to be at this level and we got to have all these things and everybody needs a Lambo. Like my daughter said to me that she's 10, she's like, yeah, and when I grow up, I want a Lambo. I'm like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like I sat her down and said, like, no, that's stupid. That is a stupid waste of money and blah, blah, blah. Even if you had tons of money, this is like a dumb thing to do, and I was nice about it, but I just was like, this is just a trap. Like for you to spend all your money on this car, that you're never going to I can't even go anywhere. I'd rather have my FJ any day, I'm like, what are you talking about? But like, yeah, the kids don't get it.
No.
They want to be cool, but they're not. And then they try and say, well, I'm being original. And I'm like, no, you're not. All your friends dress just like you. Everyone looks like you. Everyone's doing the same thing. It's just like a lot of different movements, a lot of different things. I'm like, nothing you're doing here is anything on your own. You all look the same, just so and it's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. As for me, I spent 34 years in a cult. I'll never do it again. I'm going to be myself at whatever cost that brings me, because I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, nobody's going to ever tell me what I should or shouldn't do. I know what I should or shouldn't do. I know. I have this thing in me that tells me so.
I was going to say, there's that thing inside of you that tells you if something feels right or if it feels wrong. And if it feels wrong, you might want to rethink that.
For 34 years, I told myself, no, it will. I remember the first words I said to my grandma in the temple. I said, this is really weird. What is going on here? And she said, don't worry, you'll get used to it. And I thought, I shouldn't have to feel that way on my best day ever. Like, this is supposed to be my best day ever,
You should feel like it's like your wedding day, right?
Yeah. And it didn't. It felt scary. I felt scared. And afterward, I was like, what the hell did we just do? Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And I'll never do that to myself again. Not ever. Because God talks to you more than you might realize if you just listen,
You got to, you have to have open ears though. And a lot of the times we don't. I'm guilty of it. I'll put the blinders up as much as possible until it slaps you in the face. And then you're like, damn,
that's always a rough one.
I know you gave me all these warnings, but I thought I could get by this time. And he's like, nope, sorry, partner. Not this time. I told you.
And it's true. Like, how many times do you kick yourself and say, I knew I shouldn't have done. I knew that was this or that. It's not, God isn't like you think it is. Like, God is all around you. When it says pray always and do not cease, it means have a constant talk with him. Like, it's all, a dialect is always in there going. Like, if you really stop for a minute and think about it, like, that feeling you get, like, oh, don't run that stop sign. Ooh, don't do this. Ooh, that guy needs some help today. Go smile at this person. Go say hi to that person. Like, it's so little, it's so insidious, but you may not know how important it is.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, and now I don't even question it. I just do it. My kids think I'm crazy, but, and it's, my son, especially because they turned a lot of that off in 2020 successfully. They isolated people enough where my son said, nobody talks to each other like that anymore. Cause he said, oh, you knew that lady at the store. Where did you know her from? And I said, I don't know that lady. And he said, Mom, you just like had a full conversation with that lady. You had to have known her. I'm like, I don't know her. And he's like, well, why'd you start talking to her? I said, I don't know. She came up to me and said something, and then it just turned into a conversation. And he's like, why would you talk to a weirdo stranger that long? And I'm like, I don't know, because she talked to me. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. And I'm like, no, it's normal. It's really normal. They probably went home and had a better day.
Yeah. Now it's got to be through all their communications through the phone though. That's the strange thing. It's like everything is through the Black Mirror now. And it's getting scarier and scarier because they're trying to make that natural. And it's the most unnatural thing out there,
How much of it is Conjuring? What did he do with that Black Mirror?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what runs AI? What runs all this stuff? Like, this is all, and then people, the shit they want to focus on, because this always comes up because I wear makeup. I'm like, listen, I understand. If I looked like a whole different person when I woke up in the morning, that's not okay. All right. I get that's deception. I put on some eyebrows and a little bit of blush. I don't think that's going too far. Let's get real here. It's not the same thing, but they want to focus on that. And they're like, ooh, but that's magic. That's one of those things, those forbidden knowledge. I'm like, do you use a phone? And they're like, oh, well, that's not the same thing. I'm like, do you own anything? Because you shouldn't own anything. It's prideful.
Yep.
And then they're like, oh, well, no, it doesn't say that. I'm like, it certainly does. It says a lot of things. You might want to brush up on it. But it's just funny to me that they'll focus on those little tiny things because they don't want to see the big picture.
Yes.
Because if you do, then you've
Well,
got
and
to
it's easier
acknowledge
to,
all of it.
isn't it easier to point out someone else's flaws than look at your own? And
Oh,
that's the
for
other thing. We have a
sure.
lot of people that love to call everybody else out when their house is not in order themselves. So
Absolutely. And we all fall short. I tell my husband and everyone on this podcast, I'll say right now again, I fall short of the glory of God every single day, but at least I wake up tomorrow and try again. Because
yeah,
my heart is dedicated to God. That's where my Christian podcast lies. My heart is dedicated to God. That's all you really need. Like, it'll get you there. Trust
yeah,
me. You know, I mean, at least we're
absolutely.
trying to change something. At least we're trying to at least say something. You know, it's not always easy.
Well,
So,
and the other thing is we're supposed to evolve as creatures, right? We're supposed to
yes,
grow throughout life. And it seems like most people stop growing once they get a job, get married, have kids. That's it. They stop
very
growing at
fixated.
that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it just becomes they get stuck in the loop. And, that's the part of the game, right? It's one of the traps. And I think one of the key things is to always strive to grow and to be a different, or not different, but better person than you were the year before. Something has to
Yes.
change. If you're the same person that you were a decade ago, that's not good.
Nothing changes if nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
And the worst thing we can see as a nurse, like I've been a nurse 24 years, the scariest thing we'll ever see as a nurse is another nurse walk on the floor and know everything. They'll come on the floor if they're the type of person that's like, oh, I know, I've done that, I've done this, I don't need to know. Yeah, I know how to do that. That's a terrifying person because every single person, as much knowledge as I've had, as many things as I've done, there's always something that's going to be new. Like you can
Yep.
always learn. I want to every single day. Like I hope I never get to a point where I'm so stagnant that I'm like, oh yeah, I know everything.
Oh, this is boring. Yeah.
Yeah. How stuck up is that? That's just pompous. I mean, I don't know. That's just me. I don't know.
Well, people get there though, money,
Yeah.
fame, a little
No.
bit of attention, and it goes right to people's heads.
Oh, 100%. That is so true, especially money. And that's why it's mentioned a lot in the Bible about rich men getting to heaven. And I'm not saying I wouldn't like more money because that would be great and all. But like also I feel like if you get to that level where it's so much that you lose a piece of yourself in it somewhere.
Well, and what did you do to get that money? Right,
Hmm.
that's the other part of it too, is again, did you make a deal to get that money? Did you compromise yourself to get that money, or did you do it altruistically? and
Yes.
and it has two totally different meanings depending on how you
Yep.
attain it.
And what you do with it.
Yep.
I know no matter, even my son said to me, Mom, what if you get to the point where you can do podcasts all the time and that's like your job? And I said, no, I'll always be a nurse because nurses die. They don't quit. Like he started laughing. He's like, you're so weird because it hurts your body. I'm like, yeah, but I love my job. Like
Yeah.
it's who I am. Like I like to help people. Like whether I make, even if I had all the money and I only made my little amount like per day as a normal nurse, I would still do it. Like that's just part of who I want to be. Because if you don't go outside of yourself sometimes, what a sad existence. And
Yeah.
not just your children and your family. I'm talking about go outside of yourself, even in just prayer. Like it's a wonderful thing. So that's me. I don't know. I took you way off the beaten path and I've kept you a really long time. Do you want to hit on anything else? Did we cover all the fun things?
Oh, we could
Did
go
we
on
miss
for
anything?
hours. I
Mm.
mean, yeah, I think no, I think we hit. If you're looking at it, and anybody that's interested, check out the orphan trains, the incubators, and the cabbage patches.
Oh,
and
yes.
see what's out there. It could be a whole lot of nothing, but there could be more to it.
Yes.
It's one of those things when you really start digging into it, you scratch your head and you're like, what the hell just happened?
Yes, I'd love to have you back or vice versa another time about the temple. I would love to show you some of the mud flood pictures and all the weird
Oh, absolutely. I
stuff I
love
found on
old
that.
buildings, so I am in.
You're like, all right, don't keep me hostage for hours. I know, because you get talking and then you're like, oh my gosh, has it really been that long?
Yeah, I
Uh,
hate that because I don't have a clock around, so I never know. And then I finish and I'm looking around and I get out there and I'm like,
uh,
I was in there for 3 hours.
yeah.
It felt like 45 minutes.
Right? It does. Yeah, I could keep going and going, but I don't want to totally take up your whole night. So, but I appreciate you coming on so much. Thank
Oh,
you
this
so
was great.
much.
I had a great time.
Me too. All right. Well, and everybody go check out his Cabbage Patch series is really good. And the Orphan Trains. It was great. Like that was something where I was like, oh my gosh, does anyone know him? I need to talk to him. I was like, this is awesome. So you did a really good job on those
Oh,
and the
thank you. I
coverage of it.
appreciate that.
Yeah, all of your stuff is great in general, but I really enjoyed those. So I thought it was very mind provoking, wondering exactly where all these people went and exactly what happened to them. That's a wild ride. That's a very interesting story. So, anyways, this has been a wonderful time and I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Want
Heidi.
to tell them one more time where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find all my stuff on Instagram at the Great Deception Podcast. I'm on all the podcatchers, so same thing, Great Deception Podcast. I have a Patreon where you can get all the Monday Night Master Debaters, which is kind of a sideshow I do every Monday. On the videos are on there. Everything else is audio only, and then yeah, so feel free to reach out to me if you ever want any more information, links, books, resources. I love passing along the information, so hit me up.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Have a good night.
Do you love the Unfiltered Rise and wish there was more? Well, now you're in luck. Head on over to Patreon and check out all our tiers for extra episodes, early drops, ad-free episodes, and more. And don't worry, Free Feed, we would never forget you. I love all my listeners. I'll never cut the episodes in half, and I'll never skimp on those as well. But if you want to support us, that's a great way to do it, and we have something in return for you. So come check us out. You won't be disappointed. Have a blessed day.